close your eyes for a second. I want you to imagine absolute suffocating darkness. It is February, the dead of winter, in the Northern Ural Mountains of the Soviet Union. The year is 1959. The temperature is dropping so low that it feels like the air itself is turning into glass, minus 30 degrees Celsius. You are huddled inside a canvas tent, shoulder to shoulder with your closest friends. You are exhausted, your muscles ache from days of skiing through deep snow, but you are safe, or at least you think you are. Outside, the wind is howling like a banshee, screaming against the fabric of your tent, burying you slowly in white dust. You are just drifting off to sleep, finding warmth in the shared body heat of the group, when suddenly something happens. Something so immediate, so terrifying, and so undeniable that you don't even unzip the tent door. You grab a knife. In a frenzy of panic that defies all logic, you slash the canvas from the inside. You cut your way out of your only shelter, your only lifeline, and you run. You run barefoot, or in just your socks, into the freezing night, into the jaws of a blizzard, knowing full well that leaving that tent means death. But whatever was inside, or whatever was coming for you, was worse than freezing to death. This isn't just a story. This is the nightmare that 9 experienced hikers lived through on the slopes of Kholat Syakhl, a name that literally translates from the local Mansi language as dead mountain. For over 60 years, the world has been obsessed with what happened that night. We have scrutinized the photos, the diaries, and the gruesome autopsy reports. We have blamed aliens, the KGB, secret missile tests, angry yetis, and infrasound madness. And then, in 2021, science tried to close the book. A study came out claiming it was a slab avalanche, a rare, delayed natural disaster. They used Disney's frozen animation technology to prove the snow physics. They patted themselves on the back, said, "Case closed," and walked away. But let me tell you something. I don't buy it, not for a second. You don't run a mile into the darkness without your shoes because of snow. You don't suffer the kind of injuries these kids did, crushed skulls, missing eyes, a missing tongue, just because of a slide. There is something deeply unsettling about the official narrative, something that feels like a sanitized cover-up for a chaos that human minds just struggle to comprehend. Tonight, we are going back to that mountain. We are going to walk in their footsteps, feel their fear, and question everything. To understand the horror, you first have to fall in love with the people. These weren't amateur tourists taking selfies on a weekend trip. These were the golden youth of the Ural Polytechnic Institute. They were tough, they were smart, and they were incredibly alive. Leading them was Igor Dyatlov, a 23-year-old engineering student who was basically a prodigy of the wilderness. He was the kind of guy who built his own stove because the store-bought ones weren't efficient enough. He was rigorous, careful, and respected. With him were Zina, Rustem, Ludmila, Yuri, and the others, 9 in total, after one guy, Yuri Yudin, had to turn back early due to joint pain. Can you imagine the survivor's guilt Yudin lived with? He hugged them goodbye, jealous that they were going on this grand adventure without him, not knowing he was shaking hands with ghosts. They were documenting everything, writing diaries, taking silly photos, flirting and laughing. Their journals from the days leading up to the tragedy are heartbreakingly normal. They complained about the local singing. They joked about the boys not helping enough with the tent. They marveled at the beauty of the snowy trees. They were just kids, full of dreams and Soviet idealism, marching toward a fate that would erase their futures in a single night. The atmosphere changed as they climbed higher. The photos from the last roll of film show the weather turning. The smiles start to look a bit more strained. The trees disappear, replaced by a barren, white wasteland where the horizon vanishes into the sky. On February 1st, they made a decision that critics have analysed for decades. They set up camp on an exposed slope of the mountain, rather than going down to the tree line, where there was wood for a fire and shelter from the wind. Why? Maybe Dyatlov wanted to practice a slope camp. Maybe they were too tired to descend. They pitched that large tent, ate a dinner of crackers and ham, and settled in. It kills me to think about this moment. They were taking off their wet boots, hanging up their clothes to dry. They were in that cozy, sleepy state, probably joking about the cold, completely unaware that the clock was ticking down the final minutes of their lives. It was the last moment of peace they would ever know. The silence of the mountain was holding its breath, waiting to exhale violence upon them. When they didn't return on time, families started to worry. But in the Soviet Union, you didn't panic immediately. You trusted the system. But days turned into weeks. Finally, a rescue operation was launched. Students, teachers, and eventually the military with helicopters. What they found on February 26th stopped their hearts. The tent was half collapsed, covered in snow. But here is the detail that makes your skin crawl. It was cut from the inside. All their belongings were still there. Boots, axes, warm jackets, money, cameras. Everything you would need to survive was left behind. Following the footprints away from the tent was a confusing, tragic map of doom. The tracks showed people walking, not running, but walking, down the slope. Some had one sock, some were barefoot, some had a single felt boot. They walked over a kilometre toward the tree line. Why? Why walk calmly to your death? Under a large cedar tree, the searchers found the first two bodies, Yuri and Yuri. They were stripped to their underwear, lying next to the remains of a tiny fire that had burned out long ago. Their hands were burned, implying they tried desperately to keep that fire going or shielded it with their own bodies. Above them, the branches of the cedar tree were broken up to 5 meters high. They had been climbing the tree. Were they looking for the camp? Or were they trying to escape something on the ground? But it gets worse, much worse. Days later, and then months later when the snow melted, they found the rest. Dyatlov was found clutching a birch branch, looking toward the tent. Zina was found nearby. But the last four were found deep in a ravine, buried under meters of snow, and their injuries were the stuff of nightmares. Dubinina and Zolotaryov had crushed chests, ribs pulverized as if they had been hit by a car crash, yet there were no external bruises. It was internal force. And then, the detail that haunts everyone. Ludmila was missing her tongue. She was missing her eyes. The soft tissue of their faces was gone. The autopsy described the force required to cause this damage as compelling natural force. It wasn't a person. It wasn't a knife. It was something else. And then there were the bizarre clues that didn't fit. The students' clothes contained traces of radiation. Why? Witnesses in the area, other hikers miles away, reported seeing glowing orange spheres in the sky that night. The skin of the victims was described as deeply tanned, almost orange, and their hair had turned grey. The Soviet government sealed the case files immediately. They told the families to have closed-casket funerals. They shut down the area for years. If it was just an avalanche, why the secrecy? If it was just the cold, why the radiation? The investigation was a mess of contradictions, hushed whispers, and terrified officials who clearly knew more than they were putting on paper. It felt like they were trying to hide a mistake. But whose mistake? Nature's? Or the military's?
Now, let's talk about this 2021 study, the slab avalanche theory.
The scientists argue that because the hikers cut into the slope to pitch the tent, they destabilized a block of snow. Hours later, triggered by the wind, a heavy slab of ice-hard snow slid down and crushed the tent. This explains the chest injuries, the weight of the snow crushing them while they slept. It explains the escape. They cut out because the entrance was blocked. It explains the lack of clothes. They were sleeping. But hold on a minute. Let's use some common sense here. These were expert mountaineers. If a slab of snow hits the tent, you dig yourself out, you grab your boots, and you assess. You don't run 1.5 kilometers into the woods in your socks in minus 30-degree weather unless you are terrified of something that is still at the tent. An avalanche happens, and then it stops. It's over. The danger is the cold. Why would you run away from your supplies into the open, freezing air? That is suicide. You only do that if staying at the tent is a guarantee of something worse than freezing. And what about the radiation? The avalanche theory ignores it. What about the missing tongue and eyes? Scavengers, they say. Little animals eating the soft tissue. Maybe. That's plausible. But what about the orange spheres in the sky? You can't just wave away witness testimony because it doesn't fit your computer model. My gut tells me the avalanche theory is too clean. It's a solution designed to satisfy modern minds that need logic, but the Dyatlov Pass Incident reeks of illogical chaos. I believe there was a military element. We know the Soviets were testing parachute mines and rockets in the area. Imagine this: a concussive blast, a failed test, a glowing object descending. The hikers panic. The blast wave causes the internal injuries. They flee the chemical residue or the radiation. They are blinded, disoriented, terrified. The government comes in, sees the mess, and realizes a test gone wrong killed 9 bright students. So, they rearrange the scene, or they just let the snow hide the evidence. Doesn't that fit the paranoia of the Cold War better than just a pile of snow? Think about the psychology of Zolotaryov. He was the oldest, a war veteran, a mysterious guy who joined the group at the last minute. He was found in the ravine with a camera around his neck. Who takes a camera while fleeing an avalanche to their death? You take a camera if you are witnessing something you need to document, something spectacular, something impossible. The avalanche theory strips the humanity out of the victims. It turns them into clumsy errors in a physics equation. But they were fighters. They survived the initial event. They built a fire. They gave their clothes to each other as they died one by one. They were fighting a battle against something, and I refuse to believe that something was just a pile of snow that had already stopped moving. In the end, the snow has melted and frozen over Kholat Syakhl 60 times since that night. The memorial plaque on the rock there simply names them and says, "To the memory of those who passed away." It doesn't say how. And maybe that is the most terrifying part of all. We live in a world where we think we are the masters. We have GPS, we have satellite phones, we have AI that can write scripts. We think we have conquered the dark. But the Dyatlov Pass is a permanent reminder that we are small, fragile, that there are pockets of this world where the rules of civilization do not apply, where nature, or something else, can snuff us out like a candle in a hurricane and leave absolutely no explanation behind. Whether it was a slab of snow, a military bomb, or a madness induced by the wind, the result is the same. 9 young hearts stopped beating in the cold. They died scared, cold, and far from home. And when you look at that famous photo of the tent, lonely and slashed in the white vastness, you aren't just looking at a crime scene. You are looking at the boundary between what we know and what we fear. The mountain kept its secret, and honestly, I think it always will. Some whispers are just too quiet for us to ever truly hear. What do you think kept them from going back to that tent? Was it just fear of another avalanche? Or do you think they saw something in the sky that night? I really want to read your theories in the comments. Don't hold back, even the crazy ones. I'll be down there reading them tonight. Take care of yourselves and stay warm. Before you click away, just sit with that feeling for a moment. You know the one I'm talking about? That slight chill at the back of your neck, that heavy silence that settles in when a story doesn't have a happy ending. If this journey up the dead mountain made you question reality, or if it made you look over your shoulder just once, then you are exactly where you need to be. We are building something special here at Twilight Whispers, a little campfire in the middle of the internet's noise, where we can gather and talk about the things that keep us up at night. If you want to keep your seat by the fire and not miss the next time we dive into the dark, please press that subscribe button. It's a small click for you, but it tells me that you're listening, that you're with me, and that you're ready for the next chapter. And listen, I am genuinely not satisfied with the avalanche theory, and I have a feeling you aren't either. I want you to head down to the comments right now and tell me, what is your gut saying? Was it the military covering their tracks? Was it something supernatural? Or was it just the cruel, indifferent power of nature? I read every single theory, even the wildest ones, because sometimes the craziest ideas are the closest to the truth. If this video earned your time today, Leave a like to help us grow. Until we meet again, keep your eyes open, trust your instincts, and don't wander too far into the dark alone. See you soon.